Hey guys, how's it all going? Vaulsc here. Time to talk to you about an infiNity event that I went to just this last weekend. So it was called Intelcom, named after the rule that comes up in ITS, and it was, of course, an ITS tournament in New Zealand. And here in my country, we don't have a lot of people playing, not a huge population compared to other places, and we got 16 players at our event, which by our normal standards was probably our biggest event and most successful event in that regard. I know compared to Interplanetaria or CanCon or some of these overseas events, which get heaps and heaps of players, it's not a lot, but for us it was significant. I also thought that it was a really significant tournament in the sense that the level of competition was a bit higher than what we used to. We went for 5 rounds, so it was over 2 days, sorry, 5 rounds, 3 games the first day, 2 games the second day. Level of competition, I would say that about a third of the players there were either very experienced with infiNity because they've been playing a long time with that set of rules and a lot of practice games, understanding how the game works, so fairly competent, or they were coming over from other systems, and although they weren't that experienced with infiNity, were just like the best tabletop gamers amongst the best around, so they naturally picked it up and actually did very well. So it was a very tough tournament as far as I was concerned. So in this video that we're watching right now, I am going to spend some time talking about the tournament. I will discuss the missions that we had to play, my preparation for those missions leading up. I'm going to analyze those missions and how that influenced my strategy for the tournament and the army list that I chose and the faction that I chose. I played Shasvastii, the sectorial for combined army, which people don't see very much. And before this tournament, I had never played as Shasvastii. I had never played with them or against them, so it was new. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about why I chose them, how I played with them, what army lists I built. We'll discuss my army lists, and I'll do a mini faction review. I won't do my normal sort of spend like 2 hours on like one faction sort of review. That won't be happening here. I'll just be talking about them in general. So I'll discuss that in this particular video, and I'll also have some remarks to make about ITS in general, how scoring works, some general sort of thoughts about that before we wrap it up. So that's what's going to be happening today. For this entire week, I'm going to be doing a series. So today's Monday. We'll be updating it. It's the 23rd today in New Zealand. I'm going to make an individual bat rep for each of the 5 games that I played because none of the games were so one-sided that they yielded no useful information. There was no game that we could learn nothing from. And each game was on like a beautiful new set of terrain and a table that I'd never played on before. Visually, it was good. Unluckily, my strength of schedule was probably the toughest out of anybody at the event. I played all of the best players, all of the players who finished at the top. So that also meant that I was playing against people who I had played against before in the past. Sadly, when there was another 10 people from out of town that I could have come up against, I only got to play against one guy, and I'd played him before the last event. So in that regard, my experience wasn't great. But what I'm trying to say is that this video here just going to be about the general tournament and the lead up to it, and about my prep and about my understanding of it. Pick my brain about that, hear my thoughts. But there'll be 5 more bat reps coming out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and so on for each individual game, so you can see what happens. I won't give you any spoilers. I think there are probably a few people out there who like watching the bat rep, not really knowing whether I win or lose. I don't always post bat reps of wins. Sometimes I post bat reps of losses as well, so you never know until you watch the whole thing. So let's get back to it. This event, ITS, Intelcom, where are we going to have a look at it? Okay, so I'm going to bring up the players pack for the tournament, and we're going to discuss it just by looking at the. Obviously, it's just normal sort of rules for ITS as you'd expect, but the thing I want to really highlight is the missions. So it was transmission matrix, acquisition, safe area, supplies, and hunting party. So that's what I had to plan for. I'm just going to see if I've got a copy of the ITS pack lying around. Here it is here. So we can discuss that in a bit of detail. I'm going to make some individual remarks about each of the 5 missions, but my opinion, my take on this, my thoughts generally about that particular choice of 5 missions was that they are very much about turn order. They're very much about the initiative. It's about what do you do if you have to go first? What do you do if you have to go second? Also, most of the missions heavily favored going second, so you had to come up with a plan of how to maximize that, in my mind, at least for my style. But you also had to figure out what to do if your opponent was smart enough to take second after winning the lieutenant role. Now, I want to make the very important and careful comment here that I'm not necessarily saying to you guys that obviously a second turn win strategy is the only way to go. What I'm trying to communicate here is that for me, in my own thinking, that would be the best way for me to go approach it. That's how I know how to win. If you're the kind of player that wants to sort of punish your opponent by giving them the bad deployment zone and getting your troops in positions where they need to be, then you need to be picking the table side if you win the lieutenant role. If you're playing an aggressive faction like Hakislam and you've got your Fide and you've got your Daylami and you've got maybe something attacking like Tariq, not that it could be used in this event, but the Kawarij, for example, if you're really just throwing yourself at them, then of course you need first turn. So take this with a grain of salt. But when I look at Transmission Matrix, that is a mission where every round you're basically trying to get more of the individual objectives are controlled than your opponent. You get +2 for each round, so that's a very easy mission for me to win if I go second. Safe area, it's all determined at the end of the game, so you can be really cagey with it and keep guys alive and just move into the zones at the end. That's a lot easier than protecting the zones, so that's why I, again, feel that's a better one to go second with. Acquisition, again, basically it's all about that final turn push. If you have the last turn, moving into the middle objective, killing whatever's there and actually capturing it. I've played that mission a lot of times and it's almost always worked, you know, to go second to move in there, provided you've got some guys left. You still have to play well for the other 3 turns. Supplies is a mission where going first is actually a fair bit better if you have smoke grenades. If you can actually block lines of sight to the objectives and quickly move, preferably a doctor for the bonus, to pick up the boxes and run away with the boxes, and then hide them for the rest of the game. Also, if you're relegated to being the guy that's going second in that, you should have something capable of just walking over there and killing the guys holding the boxes and crushing them. So in your list design and your tournament design, you need to, you know, have a way of solving that problem. That's what that's all about. And Hunting Party is probably, of the 5 of them, the least important in terms of initiative. I'm not really sure what words to use there. You can win by going first or second, but I must add that if you do have second turn, it allows you to use your engineer and actually remove the status of isolation and hunt it down. It allows you to send an important model into their lines and kill or sort of hunt down their models without any repercussions or without any sort of counter-attack, counter-punch. So going second can be pretty big. But if you have a way of going first and actually being the first one to pick off the things that are good at actually hunting down your guys, you can do that as well. But I came into this whole event with a mindset that if I won the lieutenant's role, I was going to be choosing initiative with the way I was going to be approaching it. One thing that I didn't take, one thing I ended up not doing was going with Yu Qing. I originally had an idea to run a list that had Sun Ce. Really interesting list if I could find it. I actually took version 2, even though I've bagged him in various video reports and reviews. Let me just see if I can find my little list, my folder full of lists. See if I can find him, if he's in here. I think it's this. So I was going to run this. It had Sun Ce with the lieutenant. This is the version 2 Sun Ce, and he's got Strategos level 3. But the point of this guy is to take him purely for Strategos and for the Willpower 17. If you want him to fight and be heavy infantry, you will take the more expensive version, but you can save points by running this guy. And not even the sniper. I want to save SWCs as well. So I'm purely paying 57 points purely to give me the highest chance of winning the initiative role. And also, if I have to go second and I'm up against the Fides and the Daylamis, the Strategos helps me to have more reserve models and avoid losing important units to that. And in Hunting Party, it means I can place my lieutenant last and make sure he's out of the way against anything that might, hunt him down. So that was going to be a strategy. And then everything in the list is just cherry-picked to be efficient. I even had Mage Luna in there as quite a cool choice, just because I couldn't take the Raiden. This still has a Kaisotsu hacker, so this list just generally got invalidated. I can't take the Japanese doctor and engineer. I have to pay extra points for it. So I would have had to shave stuff out of this, and I ended up deciding it was too difficult. And the appeal of Shasvastii was there, so I decided to go with Shasvastii instead. So let's talk about Shasvastii. Shasvastii are known as this faction which is heavy on the camo markers. There's a running joke that you sometimes hear about, oh, the Shasvastii player shows up and he hands his opponent the courtesy list and it's got nothing on it because everything is a marker. Now, funny, ha ha ha. In all seriousness, though, when you actually play Shasvastii seriously, I wouldn't actually recommend running only camo markers and just foregoing all of the stuff that's in normal, regular state. And the reason for that is that you're going to need some cheerleaders. The Icodron Batroid is one of the best cheerleaders in the game, and you can take 2 of them, so you probably should. Also, you're going to need Dr. Worm, because he's the only guy who can remove isolation state and mobilization from your important stuff. He's the only guy who can complete classifieds for engineering and doctoring people and stuff like that. And he's really fast. He's such a good model anyway. You now have the availability for Bit and Kiss. So that's such a superb and undercosted unit. And killer hacking with the Maestro is so good. Also, they've got an adhesive launcher. You should really be taking these guys anyway. So that's at least 4 models that are going to be in your list that aren't marker. So bear that in mind. In my lists, I run all of that stuff. But my thinking with Shasvastii is that if I was going to be taking the second turn and just hard defending passively, the real star is going to be the Noctifer. And the availability of the Noctifer in the sectorial is 3. In Onyx, it's 2, and in Vanilla, it's 1. So my thinking is that if I play this really balls-to-the-wall skew list and have 3 Noctifers in one of my list, if my opponent can't counter them, they're in a lot of trouble. And also, if my opponent does have some counters, I might be able to eliminate the things that can really stop these guys. And even if they do have the counter with Smoke and the MSV2, it's not always a sure thing. If my opponent gets it all unlucky and loses the face-to-face roll, then they're in a real world of trouble. These are models which can't be initially killed by an Alpha Strike because they're hidden. They are worth a lot of points, so at the end of the game they can move into the area for safe area or transmission matrix. You can even make a push with them because of the assault pistol, which I find hilarious. And in Hunting Party, they actually get an adhesive launcher. So there's a range band that they actually cover with the adhesive launcher, which is not covered very well with the missile launcher or the assault pistol. So they just get better in that mission, even though they're already insane. So if these guys weren't already amazing, they become even more amazing, I think, in this context. And that's why I wanted to try them out. In the list I'm about to show you, I won't actually be using any link teams at all, which is very, very rare when it comes to sectorials. And I'll talk a bit more about the Shasvastii thing in general, but before we do, maybe I think it's time for me to just open up some of my lists for us to have a look at. So let's have a look at my 2 lists, Alpha List and Beta List, and we'll go with the list that I played for 4 out of the 5 games. So the most gobsmackingly obvious thing that anybody would see about this list is that it has 3 Noctifer missile launchers in it, which is a lot of Noctifers, if you didn't already know. The next important thing about this list is that it shows 10 orders on the table, but it's actually not a limited insertion list because 2 of the Noctifers are in their own group. Now, this is clunky. It's unwieldy. I normally wouldn't recommend that anybody does this in a normal army list unless you really know what you're doing. But what's happening here is that the Noctifers are only ever going to be used for AROs, or maybe occasionally just firing a single surprise shot against a target that's left themselves in a bad position and clipping them. They can also be shifted over to Group 1 to fill out orders. Now, if I'm going first, obviously my opponent can still spend a command token to reduce my order pool by 2, but I'm counting on the fact that the Specular Killer is not going to need 10 orders to do what it needs to do, and Shishkin is generally going to be held back until later in the game when she moves out anyway. So this is about the initiative. If I have to go second, in fact, I want to go second, sorry. If I win the Lieutenant's role, I automatically go second for pretty much all of those missions, apart from maybe the last 2, Supplies and Hunting Party. But even then, second is great. All the Noctifers are in hidden deployment, and when they see a legitimate target, they shoot. If my opponent's got the tools, they don't shoot, and then just play the game. I'm defending for most of this. A lot of the time, if they send a Rambo trooper on my side of the table, I'm looking for angles where I can reveal a Noctifer, but not immediately have it in line of sight of an MSV2 trooper. Just remember with the Noctifers, you can space them apart to cover lots of lanes of fire. If they move out with a tag, you might have your Noctifers stacked so they all sort of just shoot at once like crazy. That can be hilarious. I sort of made the mistake of assuming that our terrain setup, the density of our tables, might be a bit thin and scarce because at a tournament sometimes you don't have a lot of terrain, but in actual fact, there was plenty of it. I might just take a moment to just give you guys a look at what each of the tables at the tournament looked like and give just a quick review of them. So this is one where you're sort of seeing left versus right in terms of the deployment zones. Seems fine to me. I mean, the Noctifers have got some really big, severe lines of fire through this one, but not too many. Thing about this table is that you spread them out, and the Noctifers can cover all of the big lanes of fire. You don't sort of have to clump them up in any particular spot, and they've got pretty much every angle covered. This one, I also played on this one. If you look at the left-hand side here, there are these two massive pillars, which are within, one of them is within the deployment zone, if not both of them. So this one over here as well. So no matter which side you get to deploy your Noctifer on a position where they can see most of the table, which is kind of hilarious. This one, beautiful table, Hakislam themed. This one is a bit tougher for the Noctifers because there's only a couple of angles. You've got one angle through here, which is quite long, and another angle through here, which is quite long, and maybe right through the side. But other than that, it's quite dense. So this wasn't really ideal for the Noctifers. This table, so long as a lot of the stuff's happening on the upper level, you're okay, because if they deploy further back on the gantryways, the gangplanks, as I like to call them, they can see anything else that's also on that level. But when you're moving around on the grass, the height, because you don't have any towers or anything, is not enough to see over them. Luckily, I didn't actually have to play on this one. This one didn't have to play on it, but it would have been difficult for me because there's a very large two-story structure through the middle, and the deployment zones are on either side here, and that would have obscured a lot. If I had this table side, I'm not too sure if I had enough range to get the Noctifer onto this massive tower here, but I might have even been able to move one up there. This table, I think, would have been okay. The picture doesn't really show it, but right at the top here, if I managed to get this table side, that tower covers just about everything. So that would have been brutal. It would have been rough if my opponent doesn't have that smoke MSV combo or an intruder or something like that to deal with them. So in terms of tables, I pretty much got a lot of value out of them. The Noctifers, this is a table I did play on, and again, like that other one, so long as you deploy on the upper level of these buildings, they can see everything else that's on the other upper levels, but as soon as you come down onto level 1 here, or through here, you are obscured. So there's definitely great usage of the Noctifers, shall we say. This one's another one I did play on, and the funny thing about this one is that there's a tower here the Noctifers can be on, and a tower here, but the lines of sight are a bit broken up by the taller terrain in the middle of the table. So all of these tables are decent. They're all decent infiNity setups. They could be better. Here's somebody playing in War Machine and Guild Ball, by the way. But point is that the tables weren't just completely dominant for the Noctifers and my faction, but they definitely lent themselves well for that. So let's talk about the other elements of this list. Shishkin. So she's not the lieutenant. I'm using the Aswang for that. But the thing about Shishkin is that she makes a great data tracker. So for the missions where it's sort of like Transmission Matrix, you run her out, kill a data tracker with her. Brilliant at doing that. With Hunting Party, she's still got a pistol, so she comes in close combat, reduces them to unconscious with the Prothian, then just pistols them in the face to hunt them down, so that could be very effective. The Speculo can also do that. Hilariously, the Speculo does actually count as one of the models that gets an adhesive launcher, so it's great for that too. But the idea is that if I am forced to go first, it's usually going to be in a situation where my opponent has chosen to go second, so I get to see exactly where the stuff is. I can see which angle to approach through a Shishkin or the Specular Killer and really punish them for that. And then when it's their turn to win in the final game round, they're having to get through the Noctifers to get to the objectives they need to get to. So that is the thought there. Bit and Kiss, brilliant for Transmission Matrix. Great specialist all round for the other missions. Hilariously, for Hunting Party, I already have an adhesive launcher, so I don't even need to be classified that way. Same with the Aswang. I should comment that one of the other reasons I've gone with Shasvastii is that the Aswang is a lieutenant, which is in a marker state, so it's harder to kill. If I'm going second, it's harder for them to assassinate my lieutenant with like a Daylami or a Fide, because marker state, it's harder to get to me. I could just put a Nicodron nearby when they go to discover me. A lot harder to lose him in hunting parties, so that's wonderful. And he doesn't cost any SWCs in this particular faction. So there were three reasons in general I ended up going with Shasvastii. The Noctifers, I've just discussed sort of why they are fantastic. The Aswang Lieutenant being a really good choice for some of these missions. The ability to sort of have a really strong play for whether you're going first or second is another reason. But I think one of the final reasons is that I post all my bat rats on YouTube. People know me. My opponents are really used to what I take. And this is a list with a lot of closed information. So long as I play my cards close to my chest, people won't know exactly sort of what I'm running. And what you're about to see in the secondary list, I don't really have any comments about the dock and the cheerleaders and the shrouded, so I think we can move on to the second one, is that my second list is very, very different. And you'll notice with this one, I'm running a a limited insertion list with a Sphinx and two Noctifers. So it's still got that almighty sort of punch back, aero heaven kind of thing. And if I'm on a table, it's not as good for three Noctifers. Well, I can tone it back to two Noctifers, shall we say, even though that's still a lot of Noctifers comparatively speaking. But the Sphinx being there means that over 200 points of models in this list are in hidden deployment potentially. And my opponent can see me deploy the Ardron, the Icodron, Spit and Kiss, the Doctor, and they don't know where the arrows are coming from. So they move up, they may get arrowed by a Heavy Flame or a Spitfire heading on like a 17, or it might be the missiles, or it might even be their lieutenant's adhesive launcher. I doubt it would be, but the Malignos might even put down a mine or a combi rifle if it's desperate. So this is the mission this is the list I've mainly designed for safe area. But just to finish off a point I was just making before, my regular opponents who know me, seeing me deploy those few models, won't really know that it's a Sphinx and two Noctifers and a Malignos and an Aswang. They know that Shasvastii has access to Noctifers with Spitfires or a lot more Malignos troops, or I might, I don't know, they might have just forgotten what Shasvastii has available to them. They don't know whether there are three Noctifers or two or zero in this particular list, or whether my lieutenant maybe is going to be deployed as a TO camo if I deploy him outside of hidden deployment, if I deploy him as a marker. So I'm trying to go for the element of surprise a little bit more. But let's talk about the Sphinx, because this is a really interesting one. I've never played a Sphinx before. The idea with the Sphinx is to run the Sphinx in particular in safe area, but also in one of the other missions if I'm up against a faction that doesn't have a lot of flamethrowers and it doesn't have jammers and a lot of hacking. So if I was up against Ariadna, for example, or maybe a Pano player that wasn't really, deploying a lot of... Yeah, a Pano would be kind of hard if I can't get around the repeaters. Maybe something like an Aleph player who's really going to be running killer hackers and not much else. Another combined army player, for example, Onyx might be good at. Or tables where I could actually end up on top of a building. So if I'm forced to go with the first turn, that's where I'm going with the deadly sort of 10-order run with the Sphinx. Come on, you've got to imagine that a Sphinx going first with 10 orders is going to get some damage done. You deploy him right out there. First order, he just moves 12 inches. Nobody can actually shoot at him. Then he starts moving and shooting. With a table like this, if you get this table and you're deployed over here, you can run straight over here, run straight up the top. You're basically on top of the building. You can shoot at the deployment zone. And even though, they're going to get the last turn because they're going second, they may just have nothing left. So that's one play you can do there. But if I'm going second, there's not really much they can kill. If they come over to attack my cheerleaders, the arrows are going to appear. Even if they do kill the cheerleaders, I still have, only 5 orders, but there's so much that 5 orders can do. So that's the reasoning behind that particular list. It's not a good list for lots of tournaments and lots of games, but my strategy for this event was to make it into a bit of a skew, really go with a particular game plan that I would commit to. Anything else that can be learned from this list? The Malignos, again, safe area. If you come to that last turn, you've got a Malignos which only has to move once to put 36 points into one zone or another. The Noctivas can move from the deployment zone easily into your zones. The Ichadrons have got baggage for that. The Sphinx can just look at which zone is easiest to take from them and move to that one. So that was the game plan. But yeah, what I would be looking for is, if I'm running the Sphinx list in a mission other than safe area, I'd be looking for, an opponent that would be susceptible to a lot of Sphinx damage. Like maybe even Tohar, for example, where I'm expecting symbiomates, I'm expecting, hold up sort of defensive positions. The Sphinx can go after that Gaurel sniper, and cool, the Gaurel ignores his MSV, his TO camo, but you get into the right range band before you start shooting, and there's your BS-14 against his 2 dice with 12s, and you strip off the symbiomate pretty easily, and then when he runs and hides, you might be able to climb up the building a little bit and shoot at him. So this was a list that I strongly considered running against Tohar should I encounter them in the matchups. So hopefully you guys have a pretty good idea of my lists and my thinking. I was really excited to try these out, so more will be said about the lists and the individual models and how they go in the actual bat reps themselves. But I think so far you guys have got a pretty good idea of what's going on here. I'll just have a look through them. So the first one was what? We'll go down to, I think, transmission matrix. No, safe area. Well, the first game would be on transmission matrix. We'll go to 37. So the idea here is to play in such a way that if my opponent's going first, they can get 3 points from killing the designated target with the data tracker. That's fine. Just going to have to give that up. Hopefully I can do the same thing back to them. And then at the end of every game round, move over and capture the transmission area. If I am forced to go first, what I'll be doing is leaving like the Speculo in marker state somewhere where it can contest an objective and make it harder for my opponent to spread out, or even kill a few things around their zone, or kill their hackers that are important, and really make it difficult for my opponent. I'll have Bit and Kiss there, obviously if the hacking war ensues, next to the Doctor, hopefully if it's still unconscious in my turn. Shishkin will be the data tracker, able to go after the designated target, so that's the plan there. But just in general, I'm going to be hoping to trap my opponent into moving troops onto that middle objective and springing the Noctifers out of the trap when they do so, hoping to foil their plans to do that. And if I do manage to get second turn, it's going to be a matter of just in every game round bringing stuff out of the wood, maybe even revealing Noctifers next to the antennas, and moving up with something that can actually contest the antenna every round. So maybe you do it in waves, like the Speculo goes first, and then Shishkin, and then maybe one of the Noctivas walks all the way over there, or Bit and Kiss does it. So it's a matter of moving on there with the weapons. Probably also forgot to mention that if you look at my main list here with Shishkin, I'm running exactly 300 points with 6 SWCs, but it feels like I'm getting away with a discount. And that's because my main sort of run-and-gun unit, Shishkin, pays absolutely 0 SWCs for her Red Fury. Even though it's like Blitzskull 15, it's got shock, you're firing 4 dice, no SWCs at all. The Speculo cost you 1, and then the rest of them are basically pumped into the Noctifers and Bit and Kiss. So this list feels like it's got more SWC heavy weapon stuff than it actually does, even though some of it's going towards a hacker and just a Speculo killer. The 3 missile launches are a lot, and Shishkin feels like she should be like 1.5 SWCs, if you know what I'm saying, but that's just how we roll. So definitely feel like I had the firepower to complete this mission. Safe area I've talked about a lot. The mission involves Intelcom, where you can trade the value of your classified card, or the number written in the bottom right of it, to go towards a zone. Now, this is a bit of a controversial thing, so I want to leave it until I do my bat rep about this game to discuss it in a bit more detail, just because it will make more sense when I actually show you a real-world example about how that goes. Hunting, party, and acquisition. There's very few other things to say about that. Hunting party, again, I've shown you some bat reps with that. Some models get the adhesive launches, some don't, so I feel like it helps some factions more than others. It's very good for Hack Slum with the isolation, but the main thing I want to say is that So long as you've got your Speculo with the adhesive launcher, Shishkin's got her pistol, all the Noctifers can actually respond with adhesive launcher shots out of hidden deployment if a specialist walks past. I find that quite hilarious. Very good for that mission. So another, tick in the reasons why you should go a Shasvastii for this kind of stuff. Oof, I think I've got a fair way through this video, and I've said most of the things that I wanted to say. Let's just finish up by doing a bit more of a review on Shasvastii in general. Bit and Kiss, obviously you want these guys. They're a specialist. They can use Cyber Mask. They've got Mind Layer with the repeater. They're a primo killer hacker with BTS 6. Maestro's the best, face-to-face hacking program in the game. After you render them unconscious, you can then data scan them or whatever you need to do, or hit them with missiles. You'll be doing that in Shasvastii. The submachine gun is way better than the combi rifle in most cases. The Pitcher is an amazing tool for extending the reach of Bit. They're super cheap. Kiss is a great way of detonating mines and crazy koalas because you don't really lose much for that. Acts as a repeater, so you move Kiss in range first, and then Bit's actually attacking their hacker, provided it's not a killer hacker. These guys are just absolutely amazing, so I take them every single game. Shishkin, I've talked about her in many other videos. I take the non-lieutenant profile with the Red Fury. The thing about Shishkin is that when you've got the nano screen, you can run across the table without having to be slowed down by having to hug cover. So she's quicker and more efficient. The 6.4 speed value is really, really good. Achilles level of shooting with a ballistical 15. I mean, your 4 dice 15 is great. Unbelievable in close combat, and has the ability to raise herself to like 3 wounds plus NWI. She is hurt a little bit, I think, by the ruling with shock, but we won't get into that. Physical, amazing. Willpower, standard. A little bit light on the armor side, but she always gets cover, unless it's a template because of the nano screen. So she's just a wonderful tool if you can use her correctly, and if you can play her well, and if you can time her right. It's not always a good idea to move her out straight away, but use her later. And the decharges comes in handy for the objectives, of course. Really useful for that mission, looting and sabotaging, not that we're playing that. Comes with the standard pistol. Pulsar, very good for defending with. So just a really wonderful choice in Shasvastii. The Doctor, for the reasons I said earlier, always want to take them. The Seed Soldiers are good cheerleaders, but you pay a premium of 14 points when really, if you can get away with building a list that just has 2 Echadrons and an R-drone, and maybe you've got Bit and Kiss there to help out with generating orders, you may not need them. But if you want to take lots of models, you kind of need the Seed Soldiers. One thing that can be said about them is that they start in Mark Estate and they become, they blossom into real troopers, which can make them annoying to remove if the opponent's doing just a Rambo run against them. But once they're revealed, they're just a little bit overcosted for what they are. So a lot of games you'll find that you just deploy them, they generate the order, they appear, they don't do very much, and you're paying 14 points for them. So it's a bit rich. The Cadmus, main thing there is the Morpho Scan can be used to copy Shishkin, for example, and get great stats. But he doesn't get all of the stats he wants, and he doesn't get the gun either. So I wouldn't really recommend using him for a lot of the Rambo and shooting and fighting sort of jobs. I should say that this is a faction which is due for resculpting. It's due for a rework. Corvus Belli is going to change a lot of the stuff. So I bought this starter set really late, like the other week or the other month, just because I wanted to. But I wouldn't really recommend going out and buying Shasvastii models unless you already play Combined and you have a lot of the stuff already. Like, it's really cool to have non-Octopus because you use them anyway in other factions. It's cool to have all the remotes and Bit and Kiss and the Doctor because you use that anyway. The Malignos and the Shrouded can be used in the other sectorials in the vanilla faction. So I'd only really recommend buying more Shasvastii models if you already have all of the other stuff from Combined and you'd like to branch out a little bit. I wouldn't really recommend going and buying Shasvastii as your first faction from scratch at this point. Later on, in time to come, maybe next year, Corvus Belli is surely going to rework them in general. The Aswang is a wonderful lieutenant in Shasvastii, and that's one of the reasons why I went with Shasvastii for this tournament. But outside of the sectorial, you do have to pay SWCs for him, if I recall correctly. So he should almost always be your lieutenant choice for this, because at 26 points, you've got a nice, safe lieutenant who is very hard to kill. And even if they do commit to killing him, he sometimes pulls the rabbit out of the hat with a good face-to-face roll in close combat with the Protheon, or his adhesive launcher, or if something dies next to him, he can actually eat it up and make himself even more difficult to kill in turns to come. So I really like that about him. The Haiduk is a sapper. I prefer the Toha version of this, and the Nikul, or whatever it's called. This guy, as an ARO piece, the Noctifer is just so much better. So much better value, even though you pay more points for it, that I just can't really recommend the Haiduk. The smart multi-sniper rifle is the only thing in the faction that you can use for smart sniping, smart ranged band sort of stuff, but that is not really something you are going to get away with easily in this particular faction, or the whole sort of spotlight and fort observing. That's better left to stuff like Onyx and Bakunin, in my opinion. The Noctifers, we've talked about them a lot. They are an amazing profile, one of the best profiles in the game, and I'll be talking a lot about them in other videos, so I won't spend a lot of time on them here. You're going to want to take some of them if you play the sectorial. The Diapho guy, Korax Hashed, he is cool. It's good that he can count as a Caliban or a Guaylo for the link teams, but we're going to talk about the link teams in a minute. They're not wonderful. He's an NWI Spitfire Rambo with a nanoscreen. I just prefer Shishkin for this job because she has the close combat potential. She has the Prothean potential. She's got Bliss Skill 15. The Red Fury is better than the Spitfire, so this guy's just outclassed by her. So if you're gonna do the job, do it right. That's generally my list building advice for role selection. Now the Guaylo. So here's one of the link teams you can take, but it's a medium infantry link team. Everybody on the internet knows that Vaulsc doesn't like medium infantry. That's not completely true. I can give you some examples like Drop Trooper medium infantry, like the Tiger Soldier, the Akali, Kodali. These are amazing medium infantry models. Some of the snipers, like the Nest Sniper, for example, that's medium infantry. So a lot of medium infantry I love, but these guys are another good example of medium infantry that I don't particularly like, because you're sort of paying extra points for nanoscreen, right? So nanoscreen is good if you're moving around the table in a way that you are trying to avoid having to go from cover to cover and use moves that sort of shorten your overall potential. But if you're just sitting there in your deployment zone, usually you can find cover anyway. And some rookie players, some novice players, just use the ability they've got just because they've got that ability. So it's cool. Oh, I've got a nanoscreen, so I get cover without actually being in cover, so I'm going to put it out in the open. That's a huge mistake. You should actually, even though you have a nanoscreen, you should put your guy in cover anyway, because partial cover is not the same as total cover. Just because you have a nanoscreen doesn't mean you get total cover as well. So you still need the ability to be able to guts back into cover, to find total cover when you're outmatched. And these guys just aren't going to be making enough use of the nanoscreen for my liking. With speed 4.2 and the kinds of guns they've got and the kind of points that they're worth, I'm not really going to be using them in that role. And if you take like 3 or 4 or 5 of them in a link team, then they're only providing, the AROs, which are going to be provided by the Noctifers anyway, in my opinion, or maybe even that Sapper guy if you really want to. So they're not wonderful. Again, once the faction gets reworked, I hope they'll get some special link teams where you can take maybe 1 or 2 of these guys plus some cheaper guys, rather than 3 of these guys plus 2 more expensive people in the form of, say, Shishkin or Korax Hashed. The Calibans can be a fire team. Now, I haven't really studied this enough. I'm not really sure how it works with them being in seeds, then becoming fire team. Do you have to create them? You can have some inferior infiltration guys, but as far as I know, they have inferior infiltration and then they are a seed and then they spawn. Looking at the profiles, though, they don't really have much. I mean, you're paying extra points for the Shasvastii rule and auto medkit. They're very slow. Blister skills very average. Their guns, nothing really to write home about. Engineer is interesting, but these guys aren't wonderful. Again, this faction's going to get reworked. This is a profile that needs a rework. The Sphinx, you can take this in Onyx. You can take this in Vanilla Combined. It's going to be the same as Sphinx. This is a very fragile unit. It's a very expensive unit. There's a lot that can go wrong with it. If it gets hit by a flamethrower, if it gets hacked, if it loses some face-to-face rolls, it's in a lot of trouble. Can be beaten in close combat. It's just that if you know what you're doing, if the mission is right for it, and if you're against an opponent with the right table, this guy can absolutely devastate you. He can win games in a single turn. He just demolishes them. I would recommend thinking about this guy if you like limited assertion. Think about this guy in Shasvastii if you want a tag for tag missions like Deadly Dance and all of that. The drones, not going to say anything about them. I mean, you can take 2 Q drones in the sectorial. My problem with that is if you're going hard out for that list and you're going to take 2 Q drones, you need a regular hacker for assisted fire, and the only regular hacker is the Noctifer. Having said that, that list is not a bad list. If you want to take 2 Q drone HMGs with a Noctifer hacker, that's still a good list. It's just that you are sacrificing, some of your options. You're paying quite a lot for that. I strongly considered doing exactly that in my preparations for that. I don't know if I actually have the list written down, but there was one list that I came up with where it basically had 2 Q drones, 1 plasma, 1 HMG, covering both range bands and having an attack piece there with a Noctifer hacking device. So in my practice games in future, I might actually roll that one out to have a game with it. That'd be really fun. Malignos availability 3. So when your opponent sees nothing on the board, is it a Sphinx? Is it Noctifers? Is it 3 Malignos? And that's where you can really sort of hurt people. I like them a bit more in a limited insertion because that's when you see the hackable targets a lot more often, and the assault hacker is really a really good hacker, willpower 14. But most of the time, it's just going to be your plain old forward observer. Wouldn't recommend the multi-sniper rifle because, again, why have a sniper rifle when you can have a missile launcher? And why have a non-dogged guy when you can have a guy who's dogged? Speculo Killer, you can take 2 of them in the sectorial, so that's kind of funny. I usually would recommend taking 1, though, because if there's a job that can be done, usually it's only going to take 1 to do it. And if you're thinking of putting the Speculo in 2 different places, well, there's going to be an optimal place to put them and a suboptimal place to put them. So you're getting just lesser value by default from the second one, and that's in general, and that's just generally why people build balanced lists in war games. Like if you take 10 of this one thing, there's the optimal spot to use the first one, a great spot to use the second one, and then a decent place to put the third one, and then maybe a not so ideal place to put the fourth one, and then it just starts deteriorating. So the more redundancy you have, the less value you get of those other things which have weaker and weaker jobs to do. The Shrouded, I almost ran into the event with a list that had 4 of them. So I took 2 forward observers, 1 assault hacker, 1 mine layer, and that puts like 6 camo markers out there. If you 5 camo markers if you put the mine layer out there. And that makes this list very good at completing the mission with pressing buttons, being in the right spots, raises some doubt about what's what. But I eventually scrapped that particular list because even though there were the 4 Shroudeds, 3 Noctifers, Bit and Kiss, the Asswang, it didn't have anything that could proactively go and shoot their side of the board. So I needed to bring in the Speculo and Shishkin because I couldn't count on going second every time. And you do need to actually, punch people sometimes. You do actually need to take advantage of your position and go over there and shoot things. And just a combi rifle is not really enough for that. So, in a nutshell, those are my basic thoughts about Shasvastii. We'll be saying more about Shasvastii in the next sort of 5 YouTube videos from Vaulsc as we go through the games. Some of the games are really exciting. You won't want to miss them. Full of action and on some new terrain setups that you don't normally see me play infiNity on. So I hope you stick around and check it out, guys. But that's it. Look forward to it. Vaulsc playing Shasvastii for 5 games for the first time at the Intelcom ITS tournament in New Zealand, Wellington, in April. So thanks for checking this one out, and we'll see you guys soon.